Hello and welcome. My name is Ibrahim Babatunde Anoba, and I am a fellow of the Center for African Prosperity at the Atlas Network. It is an honor to be here with you today at the Africa Regional Liberty Forum. In the next hour, we will be thinking big about the possibilities, opportunities, and challenges ahead for the people of our dear continent. You're probably aware that the 2021 World Bank World Poverty Report ranks 9 African countries among the 10 most impoverished in the world. For example, Africa's most populous country, Nigeria, has the highest number of people living below the poverty line worldwide. More so, to fix Africa's infrastructure deficit, the continent will need a combined spending of about $170 billion annually. That's really huge. And thousands of Africans are also perishing in the Mediterranean Sea every year to escape insecurity, poverty, and of course to pursue better economic opportunities. Certainly, Africa has put itself in an extremely difficult developmental trajectory. Things have to change. The question of what must change, that is, how should Africa be reimagined, is of deliberation on this panel. What should we prioritize as a people? What is the role of civil societies in helping governments address the plethora of challenges facing each country? And indeed, can Africa, in development terms, be truly reimagined? It is now my honor to introduce our experts who will join me in these conversations. Aimable Manirakiza, the Chief Executive Officer of Center for Development and Enterprises, Great Lakes in Burundi. Chris Atting, Deputy Director at the Free Market Foundation, who is also a Senior Fellow at African Liberty and member of the Advisory Council of the Initiative for African Trade and Prosperity, and of course, Kofi Bentil of Imani Center for Policy and Education in Ghana. Gentlemen, welcome. It's my great privilege to be in this circle with you guys. First of all, I want to appreciate everybody for joining me, and you guys look so awesome. So my first question will be to Mr. Kofi. And in one of our pre-conference conversations, you vehemently talked about the need for Africa to look at how it negotiates with the world. In other words, be very conscious of not getting ripped off by the entirety of the world, particularly in most recent times, China. So what do you think could be the way out for us to negotiate better deals in terms of loans, in terms of negotiating trade policies, in terms of negotiating political policies? Because certainly, Africa can never be reimagined, as you said, unless we pay critical attention to how we negotiate with the rest of the world. So what do you mean by renegotiating our priorities? And if at all, how do we improve our negotiations, Mr. Kofi?
Right, thank you. So, yes, I think that's a major weakness in Africa, and for that matter, with African leaders, we don't negotiate right. If you ask me, what should we do about that? I would say, so I teach negotiation skills, so sorry if I go a bit too much into the theory, but the point is this: we need to improve our leverage each time we are going to deal with anybody on any other side, whether the West or China or the emerging European countries, Eastern European countries. We need to improve our leverage, evaluate the leverage properly, and then most importantly, we need to find good negotiators. And sometimes they are consultants, and sometimes they're in the private sector, and let them lead the negotiation. Part of why we make very bad choices and we negotiate very poorly is because a lot of times it is politicians who do the negotiation. They have a very short time horizon. They are trying to achieve something before their time is up, and their considerations may not really be long-term benefit. So you see that we make the same cyclical mistakes. Everybody goes and negotiates, everybody negotiates wrongly, and then we get stuck with a bad deal. So it is important that we take a long view. Number 2, we do the homework of evaluating our leverage and improving our leverage. Number 3, we need to have the right people at the table to do the negotiation, and we need to make sure that whatever we are trying to get will be durable. It will outlast, a political cycle. And that's difficult for politicians to understand. But we really need to get to the point where, whether it's civil society or ordinary citizens, we put a lot of pressure on them to negotiate right. The last time I was in a negotiation in China, I was leading a delegation, and the negotiations broke down. Now, to somebody, they will say, well, that was a failure, but it wasn't a failure. It was a very good success that it broke down because they expected a certain posture and they expected to get away with so much, and there was no way I was going to let that happen. So it broke down. Guess what? After returning to Ghana, the Chinese came to us and we had to talk through the whole issues again. So this problem, which has been with us for the best part since independence, is one of the things that we need to deal with if we are going to reimagine Africa.
Brilliant. So, Chris, I want to bring you into this conversation about renegotiating Africa with the rest of the world. And we really cannot talk about renegotiation without, of course, focusing on the recent China. So if you look at the data, it shows that Africa hasn't really benefited as much as China has from our encounters in the last, say, 20 years. And if you agree with what Kofi is saying about the need to renegotiate our policies with these superpowers, what do you think should be the engagement strategy for Africa in terms of China? Do you think China can actually help Africa attain its economic priorities or realize them? Do you think we should negotiate with China? If at all, we actually do need to negotiate with them, Chris.
Thank you, Ibrahim, and hello to the fellow panelists. It's a great honor. To start off with, it's a bit of a meta point, but if you look at the Africa Continental Free Trade Area and increased trade in and of itself should be seen as win-win. So we shouldn't just think about one side winning or losing more than the other. So I think it's up to each African country and government to decide on their priorities and see what the Chinese government, for example, or the American government, what the European Union can bring to the table. It shouldn't just be a case of African governments feeling that they have to come on from a weaker position to those other governments, and that they can't bring anything to the table from a position of strength. With increased trade, whether it's through the African Free Trade Area or other agreements, it might be environmental sort of projects, that kind of thing, one should definitely consider that the exchange is not just goods and services, but it's also the exchange of know-how. It's the exchange of expertise. It's the exchange of ideas. And you can get that sort of thing from engaging with other countries, which you might not even want to focus on, for example, goods and services. I think that's also important to keep in mind when one engages with other governments around the world. There's, I think, a great need to share the know-how. For example, we've seen with COVID, the waiver on the TRIPS agreement, which has said that will increase the flow of vaccines around the world. What will increase the flow of vaccines is when African countries and governments can also build their own factories. And you do that when you build up the expertise and the know-how, and you build that up again through the sharing of knowledge and the sharing of resources. I think it's a long process. It can snowball either way, in a good way or a bad way, but there's definitely momentum there that African governments have on their side. I think the future and the century is very much in Africa's hands. The whole world is going to want to trade with Africa. There's massive untapped potential, and hopefully we see the right economic freedom reforms that enable African citizens to benefit the most.
Well, I think you pretty much spot on your point about the engagement, negotiations, or trade relations leading to an importation of expertise from across the world into Africa. But again, that rose a different set of questions on its own about, so do we then trade off by inviting China to bring its experts to Africa to fix the roads, to build the ports, when in fact we do have engineers and those kind of experts in Africa. And of course, this is going to bring me to a mobile, because your remarkable project, the Shoboka project, I think I wrote an article for Atlas's website about that project. It was really fascinating, and you guys did incredibly well with it. So congratulations on the success of that Shoboka project. But I want to ask, because that project is specifically focused on entrepreneurs, right? So if Burundi is spending a lot of time engaging with China, which of course eventually lead in some extent to Chinese experts coming to Burundi to do jobs that Burundian engineers or entrepreneurs can actually do. Do you not think, going by the the virtue of your remarkable entrepreneurial project, do you not think that having China bring its own experts is in some way disadvantageous to local entrepreneurs in Burundi? In other words, are Burundian entrepreneurs losing out from opportunities that they could have otherwise have used if China hadn't brought its experts into Burundi, Imabo?
So I think China and Burundi, entrepreneur in Burundi, what I think is very important for Burundi or any entrepreneur in Burundi is access to the market without a challenge from big people or group of people in the government. And most of the country where we have China or niche group of entrepreneur who we call entrepreneur, but is not entrepreneur. They make a monopoly in different products. So this system, we have also looked to the approach with China in Burundi, but and these for approach from China in Burundi in terms of monopoly in different products have a negative impact for small and medium entrepreneurs in Burundi. That is I think the same situation, not only in Burundi, but in most of the countries in Africa. So what I can say is that entrepreneurs in Burundi need to access to market without challenge created by legislation around monopolies from government influenced by China system or any other group from outside of Burundi.
Well, that's right, because when I was reading your report about the Birashaboka project, I couldn't help but imagine the incredible ordeal that entrepreneurs in a politically stifling environment like Burundi have to deal with on the one hand, and on the other hand, contend with the idea that bringing expatriates or experts from foreign countries like China or whomever countries engaged with Burundi will kick out entrepreneurs in Burundi out of business. So, for instance, you bring in the China CCE to fix the roads in Bujumbura. That will, of course, say the construction companies in Bujumbura will otherwise be out of business because what they should be doing is now being done by the CCE. But I want to come back to Kofi, and this is still on the economic re-engagement. So, of course, the AFCFTA, that is the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, is headquartered in Accra, which is really beautiful. But the problem with that is that perhaps an opportunity is that now Africa has two primary frontiers to pursue economic negotiation with. And that's, of course, is externally with, of course, the traditional partners like China, the IMF, and the World Bank, but now also within Africa itself. So countries like Ghana can have bigger, much more robust economic conversations with countries like Seychelles or Sao Tome and Principe. But the question that often arises is, the AFCFTA on paper is beautiful, but implementation is a problem. So as somebody that is involved with Imani in Ghana and also pretty much close to the AFCFTA headquartered in Ghana, how do you think we can make the best out of this AFTA, particularly considering the fact that, as you said, we have to really economically reimagine Africa?
Right. So it's a very, very important question. And I've been in a number of conferences, and wherever we go, much as everybody is excited about AFCFTA, and we are also excited, we like to focus on what could be the potential showstoppers for the AFCFTA. Why we say that is that, first thing we say is that the AFCFTA is going to be a tide that raises every boat up. So we will all be better off under AFCFTA. But there will be losers. When you have this level of liberalization across a continent, from Morocco down to Nigeria, there will be losers in between. Why? Because you don't have the same strengths and resource outlays in every place. So it may be possible for somebody to produce furniture in Morocco, bring it to Accra, and it will be better furniture that my local carpenters can produce, and it might also be actually cheaper. It may be possible for somebody to sew a suit from South Africa, land it in Accra, and it will be better quality and cheaper than what I have here. So AFCFTA will be great and it should succeed. But we need to focus on the fact that there will be losers. Now, the losers are going to come from some of our weakest sectors. So they are going to come from the artisans who are in the neighborhood and who are trying to, a small carpentry shop, a seamstress somewhere down the line, and they are economically already weak. Now, when people realize that they will lose out in an arrangement and they don't have much of a voice or there is no mitigating arrangement for them, they will kick against it. And if these people mobilize, they have sufficient numbers. So my point is, what do we have within each country to first identify the potential losers and do something to try and mitigate? There's something I call value chain cooperation. Value chain cooperation says that, okay, if you're sewing or if you're a carpenter, you don't need to make the whole furniture or make the whole dress. Maybe you can do a certain part of the value chain and more or less add to the finished product instead of trying to do the whole finished product. It's just an idea. And what I'm saying is that AFCFTA stands a huge risk of failing if we do not mind those people who may lose out, especially if those people find a way of mobilizing themselves to hit against it. Now, we absolutely need to make it succeed. So we also need to make sure that the potential benefits of AFCFTA are energized. And part of the energy will come from something that looks like protectionism, right? So a lot of us look up to China, a lot of us look up to Europe, a lot of us look all over the place except within Africa. Now, if we are going to look within Africa, and Africa is rising up, you cannot get the same economies of scale as they have in China. But you need to have a situation where we can raise things up slowly and maybe get to that point. Okay, so in the meantime, in the transition period, what do we do to make sure that we can trade as much as possible within Africa? It is in Africa's interest and it is in everybody else's interest. If we don't get this thing right, you will continue to have people migrating across the Mediterranean Sea to Europe. So it is in everybody's interest. But this transition period is crucial, and we really need to sit and think through it. First, how do we transit and wean ourselves a bit off some of our natural or our normal trading partners? And secondly, what do we do against the potential showstoppers, for instance, those who will lose out in this whole equation? Mm-hmm. If you take the AFCFTA together, I think Africa is capable of providing at least 60% of all its own needs.
Right. I think Kofi made a really...
And we have to trade with others. We should.
Right. I think Kofi made a really... very important yet often neglected question about the AFCFTA. It might be so beautiful, but as you said, initially there will be some people that are going to be left out from the initial period. And of course, I think to a large extent, what will determine the success rate of the AFCFTA in itself, we largely dwell on its ability to include people in the informal economy in countries, but also in smaller countries, generally like Burundi. And I'm not saying that, to say Burundi is a small country, it's a beautiful country, but economically, Burundi is not as powerful or as Ghana or as Nigeria or South Africa. So there is this original questions about countries like Burundi missing out of the AFCFTA and countries like Ghana, South Africa, Nigeria benefiting the most. And I'm going to come to you, Chris, but let me just ask Amy with this question. So do you think there is much enthusiasm about the AFCFTA in Burundi? Just a quick yes or no, and I want to follow up on that based on your response. Imebo, do you think people are so excited about the AFCFTA in Burundi as we've seen in Ghana and Nigeria?
So I think we have two people who I can talk about. There are the people who don't believe to open Burundi to other markets, to other countries. But there's another group who believe that open more to Burundi to other market can help Burundi people to get more opportunity than today. So I can say here, people when I talk about the first group of people is a specific some member of government, people in some member of parliament, in senate, some group of politicians Burundi who don't understand why Burundi must open their market to other countries, or why Burundi must be part of the new agreement. In short, it means we have a group who are influenced by protectionism, nationalism. So that is what we have actually in Burundi. But there is other people who say access to these new markets. There is at least minimum of thing we must do because we have be party of different economic region, but access to be a part of different economic region doesn't give us the opportunity to access to market or open our Burundi to others talent or innovation. So that is what I can say about what is the situation actually in Burundi.
Right. I just want to link that to your remarkable project, the Fungwa Ninja project. I think it was run last year. I also read your report on that, and it's so remarkable to see the storytelling you undertook in that report. I read one of the stories about this lady on the border trying to import eggs or trying to sell eggs on the border, and she was bringing it from, I think, from Bujumbura or Burundi to maybe Tanzania or somehow, and she had to pay multiple taxes on both ends. So it's so incredible how much Atlas Partners in Africa puts a lot of premium on telling personal stories as these policies affect the Africans generally, and of course individually. So the question about that project is that I know that's one of the things you're trying to solve with the Fungwa Ninja project or campaign is for Pierre Nkurunziza's government to rethink, of course, in this case, reimagine how it approached border trade policies. Now, in the context of the AFCFTA, because of course, as you said, it's going to open Burundi to the rest of its neighbors and of course to the larger continent. But Aimable, do you see the AFCFTA helping as an innovative way the Burundian government, who of course have always thought in old balances? The border approach or the trade policy approach has been treated as old, but the AFCFTA is bringing new approaches. Do you think these new approaches will bode well with the Burundian government, who of course thinks in old ways? Aimable.
So I think the new agreement will help so much to the Burundi to access to many opportunities, as I said before. So according what government think about the new agreement, I think actual government doesn't have solution to get solution to many problems we have now, like actually the government have a problem with the dollars, they have a problem with European Union and many other countries in terms of political situation. So I think actually the Africa Free Trade Area will be a good thing according what I have seen some month ago, because according, for example, what we have done through from 1 year, I have give most of the people to know and to understand the power of free trade for Burundi, especially for women who or men or young people who try to walk through for cross-border trade. So this has give another future. What does mean trade for Burundi, and what is the impact for Burundi if you you try to reduce different barriers, but specific in terms of protectionism in Burundi. But there is another problem if Burundi government Burundi is they think that protectionism by protect some product, by protect some public enterprise here in Burundi can also be one solution before to be in this trade movement in Africa. So I think, in short, is we have movement people who are ready to push a group of people to understand more the impact of free trade for Burundi people, specifically for our economy.
Right.
But also have another group of people who don't believe to open our market to others countries.
Right. I think you are pretty honest about that. You really can have a very an important consideration or contemplation like the AFCFTA without having divided opinions. And of course, that's the beauty of democracy. People have the right to question any policy. But I want to come to Chris, and I really want us to deviate a little bit from the economic side of things to go into the political and legal. Of course, we can't really imagine Africa unless, as we did, focus on the economics of it, but of course, on the politics side of it. So, Chris, in South Africa, we've seen some really unconvincing and uninspiring news or developments in the last 2 years, from expropriation without compensation to some really backward policies on property rights. Of course, I do believe that we cannot reimagine Africa unless we give huge credence to property rights. But of course, South Africa has always been the beacon of property rights and individual freedoms post-apartheid on the continent of Africa. So what's going on with South Africa? Do you think something is missing here as we trying to reimagine Africa towards the next 10 years?
So unfortunately, when one has onerous legislation and interference in the economy, bureaucrats tend to think that more intervention will solve the problem. So as you rightly say, after 1994, South Africa experienced massive growth compared to what came before. There was the growing of a large black middle class in South Africa, people able to create wealth for themselves, where beforehand they weren't even allowed to open businesses in certain areas. They weren't allowed to marry across racial lines, that kind of thing. So we had great progress, and then unfortunately, the last 10 years of state capture have exposed just the extent to which the South African state is involved in the economy. And when you mix the state with the economy too much, you open the door to more corruption. I think that simply follows. So South Africa has the opportunity, I think, to go in the right direction. There have been some good signals in the last week from President Ramaphosa's administration, for example, on electricity. This week we had more rolling blackouts, or what we call load shedding. But there is news now that companies and mining companies especially are going to be able to generate their own electricity. So that alleviates some of the burden on Eskom, the state electricity provider. There's also issues, as you say, around property rights. At this moment, it is uncertain what the final amendment to the Constitution will look like. There are moves by the ruling party to remove the power of the courts to arbitrate in these matters. It looks like they want to advocate for much more political power and not court power. So South Africa, I think, is in many ways on the precipice. We could go in a good direction, we could go in a bad direction, but maybe at this point it also indicates that other African countries, if they implement the right ingredients and the right ideas, things like property rights, the rule of law, consumer rights, as we say, bringing people into an inclusive economy, they could be the leading lights. Countries like Nigeria and Ghana, Morocco, other countries that, will be completely unexpected. I guess that's the beauty of the future and human potential. When people have more freedom, they surprise you in many ways. In some ways, they make decisions with which you might disagree, but in other ways, they make decisions that surprise you and that really lift themselves up. So South Africa has had its time. Maybe it could have been on an even better path, but let's see what happens going forward. And maybe we need to learn from other countries on the continent instead of other countries looking at South Africa all the time.
I mean, how absurd it is. The ANC in South Africa used to be the go-to political organization in the post-apartheid era as regards how you give opportunities to Africans. You value the African aspiration. And of course, things are just pretty much crumbling now. But of course, I think, Kofi, you are a huge advocate of political restructuring. I know Ghana has recorded some remarkable political and democratic feats in the last decade. I would say any day, anytime, Ghana is one of the best democracies in Africa for me. But there cannot be no perfect democracy. So in terms of political restructuring and rearranging our democracies, because certainly Ghana is pretty much fortunate. Maybe Ghana, to some extent, Botswana and some other countries, the likes of Nigeria and South Africa are pretty much, suffering from, democratic hangover these days. How do you think we can restructure our political spaces and particularly restructure or reimagine our democracies, Kofi?
Right. So for me, this is the most controversial part of reimagining Africa. But for not a long time, for some time now, for a few years now, I have come to the firm conclusion that we are not going to get out of the stage we are stuck in unless we reimagine our politics. And I keep saying it's the most controversial. Why that is important is that it will not be easy to fix this problem. And I always say it will take the elites coming to what we call at Imani an elite consensus. We all have to agree that, yes, we may fight over all kinds of different things, but there are a few things that we have to agree on. One of the things that we have to agree on, and if you take Ghana, which is known everywhere as a very vibrant democracy, and we are a vibrant democracy, our constitution is over 20 years old. We were all part of putting it out. One of the biggest arguments in Ghana today is that our constitution necessarily has to be reviewed. And the powers of the president and a number of our political structures have to be reviewed. So there's a lot of discussion in Ghana on that. So we are not satisfied with what we are. Now, if you look broader across the rest of Africa, here is the problem. The average African is in a political cycle. You have a situation where in Ghana, for instance, every 4 years, we have to go elect leaders, same Nigeria, in a number of other places. And the politics does not stop. And you have all the elites, the leaders, just revolving around this political cycle. It takes out a lot of energy. It takes away a lot of the resources and the thinking that we need to put towards economics and development. And that problem is real. Now, look, we generally in Africa have been trying to toe the Western democratic structure, which, like Winston Churchill said, is the worst form, but definitely the best that we have now. And that is why in Ghana, for instance, we've adopted it. But we have to be clear. We have to be clear that democracy does not mean universal adult suffrage or every man going to a polling station and then voting one man, one vote. It also does not mean changing your leaders every 4 years. Okay, look, how long has Netanyahu been prime minister of Israel? It's a democracy. He's been there forever. How long has Germany for so long? Okay, the Queen is the head of state in the UK. And I, from all that I've studied and read, can say emphatically that even in America, they do not have universal adult suffrage. They don't have a one-man, one-vote system. They have an electoral college. In the UK, essentially, it is the Queen that picks the prime minister. The vote is just a suggestion. The UK does not even have a written constitution. All right? Now, if you take other places across Europe, they have a coalition system. So it is not the people who vote for who become a prime minister per se. Now, if you take those nuances into consideration and you compare it to the situation in Africa where every 4 years we line up one man, one vote, literate, illiterate, elite, everything, and then we elect our leaders and invariably keep changing them either every 4 years or every 8 years, and we are in this cycle, then you ask yourself, what can we do to stabilize the political structure? Why? Because if we can stabilize the political structure, another way of putting it is this: if we can forget about electing leaders every 4 years for a while, okay, and focus our energies and resources more on development and building a better society, okay, Africa will be better off. I have had to deal with the issue of Burundi, for instance. And for the first time, I had a conflict as to whether Paul Kagame should remain or not remain.
Rwanda, you mean?
Pardon?
You mean Rwanda?
Sorry, Rwanda. And I said it's controversial, and I'm putting it out because I want us to start the thinking. I couldn't tell myself that Paul Kagame was a dictator. Why? Because I am keenly aware of the social cultural situation in Rwanda and the difference that Paul Kagame has made. I am not going to defend his dictatorial tendencies, and I'm not going to say he is not a dictator. But I am confident enough to say that Rwanda can go back if they did not have Paul Kagame. President Obama came to Ghana and said, we need strong institutions and not strong men. For a while, we all agreed with him. Today, the average Ghanaian will tell you, we need both strong institutions and strong men to maintain those institutions. So we need to rethink our politics in Africa. And I'm saying this against the backdrop of people like Angela Merkel, Netanyahu, and other democracies in Europe where you've had one person leading forever. And so the average person can wake up, they know that there's a stable system, and go about their business and think beyond just 4 years. Our whole elites, our whole business people, they all plan in 4-year cycles.
Right.
Because if the government changes in 4 years, your whole business could come down. We need to reimagine that. I have some ideas, but I'm not going to put them out now. What I'm putting out is that the kind of political structure we have borrowed from Europe and America has helped us somewhat, but it has put us in a rut, and we are not going to unstick ourselves from that rut if we do not reimagine the systems. This universal adult suffrage is not the same as democracy. We need to reimagine African politics if we're going to go ahead.
Brilliant. I do 100% agree with you on that because a lot of political problems we encounter in Africa today is because of colonial hangover. And the only way perhaps we can do away with that and start to think as African rather than as second-hand Europeans or second-hand Americans is to particularly decolonize the mind, and of course starting with decolonization of the education. But again, it's often come down to the political question of what should be the ideal way of restructuring. And I want to go to Chris with this real quick. We're really running out of time. So Chris, we've been seeing the clamor for restructuring, some form of restructuring in South Africa by the EFF, that's the Economic Freedom Fighter, if I understand, for some socialist restructuring. And of course, the ANC hasn't made that case less of an important case because the ANC has been so corrupt in the last 10 years such that the EFF's clamor is now eating the airwaves in South Africa. So what do you think the civil society like FMF and Imani and CDE in Great Lakes should do when it comes to accommodating the idea of restructuring on the one hand, and on the other hand, balancing things out with those that might have an idea of restructuring that we might not necessarily appreciate. And of course, all this amid the fact that we need to politically restructure, Chris.
I think my colleagues from Burundi and Ghana, respectively, they can tell you precisely the most pressing needs in their countries, and I can talk to the ones in South Africa. So, for example, Kofi could talk about how he thinks it should be restructured. In Ghana, for example, I think, not to get into the details and get bogged down because I know we're running out of time, but fundamentally a restructuring needs to keep in mind policies and ideas that enhance and encourage individual and economic freedom. I support that kind of structural reform, that kind of reimagining and rethinking. Policies such as you say from the economic freedom fighters that increase the power of the state, that simply want to keep state-owned enterprises forever, that crowd out the private sector, that only focus on redistributionism versus creation, will simply make more people dependent on the state. And I don't think that's the kind of future that I want for South Africa. So I think it's a case of looking at the big ideas of what role the state should be playing or not, should it be creating an enabling environment or not, and then look at the ingredients that you want to reimagine. So things like the rule of law, property rights, that kind of thing. I think those things are the most important to keep in mind.
Right. So finally, I want to come to Imabo. I understand that some individuals in Burundi often argue that, well, leave Pierre Nkurunziza alone. He's trying to create a magical economy like Paul Kagame have done in Rwanda. So as Kofi said, we do, of course, not necessarily have to keep up with the idea of 4 years elections every 4 years and something like that. And if individuals like Nkurunziza have used that argument, that the reason why they're trying to hold on to power is because you don't necessarily have to have 4 years elections. And I'm just kind of worried as to how people in Burundi think about this. Do they see the idea of Nkurunziza try to replicate what Kagame is doing in Rwanda by keeping on to power and promising economic change? Do people buy into that in Rwanda, or do Rwandans still believe in the idea of 4-year elections or elections in every 4 years and that kind of westernized idea of democracy? Imabo.
So thank you so much. I think Nkurunziza regime have a special in history of Burundi. Nkurunziza have realized many things that Burundian people can forget in terms of violence, in terms of corruption, in terms of take political party, divide them, kill people, prison people. I think here we are here with some parliament from Burundi. They can attest that. So what I can say about Nkurunziza regime is that the system. I'd like to inform you that the Nkurunziza regime continue today because we have the same ruling party called CNDD-FDD, ruling with the same people from Nkurunziza team. We have the president is from army group, he called Ndaishimie. We have the prime minister is the soldier. The actual president, the soldier also is from. So that means the same system, policy system or political system is continuing Burundi in terms of different sector. Actually, democracy is not the topic which people understand in this region, because we have young people who don't understand why the meaning of democracy, the history, the strength or the place of democracy in this country. So, according what Kofi say about Kagame, I think like remember, actually, we have a new constitution created by Nkurunziza before he left power. So the constitution gives actually 7 years for president, and he gives them 2 terms. That is means he can take 2, or he can also decide today to change the constitution. That is what Burundi we have actually, because the constitution gives the power to president. That is unfortunately the problem we have actually in Burundi. So we need to reimagine about in terms of the size of government we have in Burundi. So actually we have a problem in different sectors, because we have this government who are there, any sector, are there to control our life in different sectors. So this is created by these policies made by our authoritarian government we have here in Burundi.
Right.
So can I ask a question?
Yeah. If you can do that in 30 seconds, Kofi.
Right. So I just want to see or know what you think. Some of us believe that much as Paul Kagame is a dictator, at this time in the history of Rwanda, you need somebody to hold the country together so that you can have a transition later on. Okay, and and to that extent, therefore, if he were to go, you could really, destabilize the country. I don't know what you think about that.
Right.
General.
Yeah, frankly, I think of course, Africans have to look inward. We don't necessarily have to copy everything from the U.S. or the West. If that is what works for Africa, I just want to be cautious of the fact that you really cannot have economic stability, sustainable economic stability, if you do not have responsible political devolution of power, frankly. Even if somebody's going to stay in power for like 20 years, it cannot be authoritarian, because the tendency of being authoritarian then comes in if you believe or have the wherewithal to stay in power for as long as you want. But again, of course, as you said, every country has what works for them. And on that note, I would say, now the question is, I think it's clear. It's about, where do we turn? Where do we start? Do we start from constitutional reviews? Do we start from political restructuring, as Kofi said? Do we start with the economy, as Chris said? Or do we start with the people, as my friends at the CD have been doing? So on that note, I want to thank everybody for joining us in this conversation. And of course, thanks to you guys for making it a worthwhile conversation. So next, we have 3 language breakout sessions in French, English, and Arabic. They will be starting at 2:15 Central Africa time. Thank you so much. Asante.